Here we are into week 2 of the course. In this lecture, we're going to discuss the beliefs and attitudes of teachers. In order for us to truly accept and celebrate the diversity of our students, we must begin by doing a thorough look at our own beliefs and attitudes. If we want to achieve inclusive educational experiences, we need to be able to embrace others with diverse needs. We know of many examples of students with disabilities who had painful experiences in school where they never felt belonged. But we also know of examples where students with similar attributes, abilities, and needs were successfully included in their school programs. So, if on the one hand we see some students do not feel included and leave school with painful memories, and on the other hand, some students have a positive experience and a sense of belonging, what was the difference? No surprise, it depends on the teacher's attitude, their skills, and the structure of the school. The expectation that teachers can teach all students with any disability is a daunting one, a huge responsibility. And we can't blame the student for their lack of success or lack of genuine sense of belonging. That falls to the teacher too, right? Not too much to ask. The old disability framework is referred to as the charity-based model. The person with the disability was dependent on the generosity and goodwill of others. And in the cases of students with disabilities, it was hit or miss whether a request would be granted or not. In my case, even though my parents advocated for me, we had no authority. We had no real influence over what I would be getting. As an example, my parents asked the teacher to shave his beard so that I would be better able to speech read him. He refused, so I just had to accept that I wasn't going to be able to speech read him. My parents asked the teachers to provide me with the material before class so I could pre-read and be better able to follow what was taught during class. The teacher said they couldn't do that. They didn't have the time to get that material to me a day or two in advance, that I would just have to get the information at the same time as the other students. So the lesson I learned is that you can't rely on charity. Sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't. Charity also implies that I am inferior because I have to do the asking, or that I need to be fixed and earn their help. And I need their help because there is something wrong with me. People should feel sorry for me. That is the charity model. And that was the educational philosophy I grew up within. Before I go on, I want to make it clear that I was in a mainstreamed environment from K to 12. I never attended a school for the deaf. My parents were both educators. They decided they did not want me to relocate for school, to go to the school for the deaf. As a result, I was schooled through the mainstream charity-based educational model. The charity-based model puts all the power squarely in the hands of the giver. The student has zero power. Those with the power get to decide what the right thing to do is. By the time I reached grade 2, I knew no one was going to help me. The teacher would be yakking away, and I had no concept of what was happening in the classroom whatsoever. I distinctly remember thinking, how am I supposed to survive this? I saw the teacher decide what right things to do were, which invariably helped the teacher. Teachers would brag about my accomplishments. My accomplishments naturally reflected the quality of their teaching skills. They didn't know that they were helping very little, and that it was my own sense of survival that sent me every night to do 3 additional hours of schoolwork, reading, rereading, researching, and figuring things out on my own. My teachers were so proud having this deaf student who was doing so well, doing all my schoolwork and doing a wonderful job of it. All the time thinking, nothing special has to be done for this deaf student. And I would just respond politely. That's the old model of teaching students with disabilities. Under that framework, people in general, as well as teachers, would congratulate themselves for being so involved with students with disabilities, feel self-important about the generous support they provided, sought praise for their efforts on behalf of children with disabilities, while at the same time they often left the children to their own devices to figure out how to survive. After all, independent children are what is most valued. I never told my teachers that I was bored all day long in class, and at the final bell's ring, that I went straight home, pulled out my books, and tried to figure out what had been talked about, what was the point of the lessons. I would do extra research, read more than just my textbooks, in order to understand better what was being taught in the classroom. I became very independent. I had to if I wanted to pass as normal. For me, I had been taught to try to look normal and to seem normal, which means not being deaf, to look like a hearing person, to think like a hearing person, behave like a hearing person, and hide the fact that I'm really deaf. I learned very quickly that people have no patience and were not willing to repeat what they said to me. If I asked once, they would oblige politely to repeat, and if I understood, that was a big relief. But if I had to ask twice, that impatient, growly expression would pass over their face and they would begrudgingly repeat for me. If I asked a third time, I was dead. They'd get angry. So I was left to my own devices to figure out what was going on. Most of the time, I couldn't understand anything. Still don't, unless interpreting services are available. The latest model of disability is the solidarity-based model. In this model, teachers work as allies with the student. The partnership is mainly focused on breaking down barriers that interfere with the child's learning. Examples of common barriers are discrimination, lack of accessibility, the notion one size fits all, social, attitudinal, and physical barriers, lack of representation of adults with disabilities, and so on. The teacher champions their students by breaking down these kinds of barriers. The new model encourages the act of reciprocity. Teachers need to recognize that students with disabilities contribute to the classroom, their classmates' experiences, as well as the teacher's own experiences. Reciprocity should be valued. Before I started working here at the university, as you know, I was a classroom teacher. I would always allow my students to do things for me, things that other teachers might do themselves. For example, they would clean my desk, tidy the classroom, organize all the art supplies, straighten up my papers, set up the schedule, make the announcements, and so on. They would take it upon themselves to check all the equipment to make sure it was in good working order. They knew where to find the necessary tools to fix things around the classroom. I would let them do all that. They were fully aware of my efforts and energy dedicated to their learning, and they could shoulder some of the load by doing these tasks. Acts of reciprocity are empowering, juxtaposed to the charity model that is disempowering. No one should stand around and watch others do all the work. Everyone should be contributing. In the new model, interdependence is encouraged and valued. Independence is not the primary objective. Because I grew up ingrained to believe that independence is the only way to live, it was difficult, very difficult to break away from that mindset, to not do it all myself, to accept help. As a newcomer to the deaf community later in life, it was hard for me to fit in. I had always been the only deaf person in the room. Now I was learning about a different culture, new ways of interacting with others. In the deaf community, reciprocity and interdependence is highly valued and widely practiced. We help each other. Everyone contributes in different ways to uplift the community. But the idea was so foreign to me, I still struggle with it sometimes. The new model of disability states that persons with disabilities should be allowed to live ordinary lives. What does that mean? Well, what it doesn't mean is that those of us with disabilities should not be expected to aspire to live like non-disabled people. It means we should have the ordinary things in life without the societal pressure to be normal. Let me give you an example. It relates to my experience as a deaf person. Under the old model of disability, we were taught to overcome our disability. I was taught to hide the fact I was deaf and to pass as hearing as much as possible. My speech skills were and are pretty good. My English is fluent. Behold, I was a success. I overcame my deafness. Congratulate me on meeting the standards of hearingness despite my deafness. I was celebrated. But the pressure on me to work on all these hearing identities was immense. I couldn't do anything but focus on meeting those expectations to be successful as they defined it. Was that an ordinary life? I didn't take care of my health. I didn't have time to play. I could never fully relax. I couldn't just hang out. All those opportunities were stolen from me because I couldn't take the time away from my studies and my speech training to participate in ordinary things. I had to overcome my disability and show that I was successful at being hearing. I did not have an ordinary life. What's more, I was given a number of awards. People wanted to applaud me, congratulate me on being so hearing. The famous Joanne Weber makes it to the top. In my first year of university, I was awarded the Junior Citizen of the Year prize, bestowed by the National Newspaper Association. Intended to recognize the achievements of young people. What was the achievement they were honoring me for? Overcoming my deafness? That I was so successful as passing as hearing? I was so upset. I didn't want the award. Frankly, I felt insulted. What did I do to deserve this? I worked damn hard, yes, for myself. I was given no choice. It's not that I loved working that hard. I had no other choice. Why should I be given an award for that? It makes no sense. No sense to me at all that they thought I earned this award. But my parents disagreed. They forced me into the car and we drove to Regina where the event was held. It was a fine affair with top government officials in attendance. The top business people were there, and an elaborate banquet including a formal photo session taken of recipients and sponsors. I was given a parchment and a medal. The whole thing just upset me. I only wanted to live an ordinary life. That's when things shifted for me. I began to realize that the societal view of overcoming one's disabilities and being praised for it was flawed. It didn't sit well with me. So back in your classroom, you know you're expected to meet the needs of all your students, including those with disabilities. You are responsible for making that work. But how? It begins with your mindset. If your mindset is ready, willing, and prepared to accept children with disabilities in your classroom, that's where you begin. Mindset can be defined as the specific beliefs that we hold about ourselves and other people. The beliefs we hold about our own and others' personalities, intelligences, talents, skills, potential, and so on. The mindset applies to oneself and to others. Having a growth mindset is different. In the old charity model, the notion of developing a growth mindset was not considered at all. A growth mindset means you believe that traits are capable of changing, such as intelligence, skills, behavior, and that everyone can grow. Well, I was taught under the weight of the old disability model. I was successful because of my superior intelligence, my natural abilities with language, my extreme work ethic, and my parents' overwhelming support. Those elements are what I attribute to my success. If any one of those factors had been missing, then I would not be here today. I don't believe. I wouldn't have been as successful as I am. I would have had an experience more typical of others in the deaf community, which limited them because of the disability framework. The growth mindset believes all people are capable of success, but it doesn't look the same for everyone. Failure is acceptable. Everyone learns differently. The attitude is, if I fail, I can work harder next time. The emphasis is on learning, a willingness to take on challenges. The goal is the effort put forward, not the outcome. In contrast, the fixed mindset believes that growth is not possible. Success is not possible, no matter what is done. The child will fail because they lack some predetermined capabilities. A growth mindset believes that with effort comes success. With effort, there is growth. Effort is more important than any predetermined intelligence level. Intelligence does not lead to success. It's effort. Needless to say, the fixed mindset reflects the old model of disability. This mindset believes that setbacks or lack of progress is due to low ability. The fixed mindset believes hard work or practice will have no effect on outcomes. The fixed mindset attributes failure to a lack of innate abilities such as intelligence or other abilities. Pretty hard to become motivated when those around you subscribe to this old disability mindset. In the old disability model mindset, if you failed, you were not likely to try again. Not really. It's too costly to take such risks or to take on a challenge. What's worse is what we call the grade 4 wall. Some students give up trying to read, stop trying to improve their reading skills because they sense they are falling behind, not able to read for information, for research purposes, as an example. In their heads, they quit school. Though their bodies still come to school, but you can see they are not trying anymore. They've learned they should give up. They feel like a failure, and they feel it's better for them to give up instead of putting in the effort toward even more failure. They may keep going to school for social or other reasons, but they are not truly engaged in their schooling and learning any longer. Adopting a growth mindset allows the student to accept failure. Failure does not equal done. It means try again. It means find the courage to try again. Teachers experiment with different strategies and then they figure out which approaches will encourage the students to practice the strategy. For an example, the old research said the best way to teach language to deaf students was to surround them with auditory stimulation. In those environments, the student will absorb language just like hearing students do. As long as they are in the regular classroom among hearing speaking peers, they will pick up language. Frustratingly, people still believe that today, but when faced with the fact that it's not working, then they look for a better way. A better way is not just finding an alternate book or a slightly modified way to teach vocabulary or the mechanics of grammar. The reliable research shows that language skills improve with language use in natural contexts, actually using language, introducing new vocabulary and concepts, and integrating them into daily conversations in the classroom. This has proven to be the most effective way from teachers' experiences and from research. And this is the teacher's responsibility to research the proven practices and approaches and bring them to the classroom to engage and partner with your students with disabilities. Coming from a growth mindset, the brain is considered a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger the connections become. The corollary is true. The less stimulation, the weaker it becomes. Modeling a growth mindset falls to you as teachers. If you model a growth mindset and believe in the students and your own ability to grow, they will believe it too. They'll buy into the growth mindset. From my own experience, and let me admit off the top here, that I was always lousy at math, and subsequently, I was lousy at teaching math. I especially struggled with teaching mathematical equation. It's my weakest skill, to be sure. So I would be at the front of the class trying to work through a lesson and end up getting myself confused, and the students would laugh. And I would laugh. But the students who got it would help me out. They would come to the front and they would lead the class in discussion, and a group effort would come out of it to finally work out the concept. Remember my earlier points about interdependence and helping out? We were all practicing a growth mindset. You want to help your students to establish a framework for problem solving. The most effective way to do that is by failing and trying again, failing and trying again. The more often that cycle repeats, the better. There is nothing wrong with making a mistake if it leads to reflection and adjustments for the next attempt. This builds success. The growth mindset is a huge shift in thinking for us. It sure was tough for me. Being indoctrinated within the old disability model, I thought I knew everything. After all, I had made it. Look what I had achieved. I'd won the lottery. My thinking was so wrong. We need to be more accepting of failure. We tend to protect students with disabilities from failure. Our bleeding hearts deem it inappropriate to fail students with disabilities. It would injure their self-esteem, so we coddle and try and make it easier for them. We certainly can't fail them. But students know full well how our society views failing. Failure in school is shown through poor grades. A snapshot of some effort on one day. So what? Failure should not mean you're done. Another cultural definition of failure is when your character dies in a video game. Despite all your maneuvers and lightning fast reflexes, you're shot or blown up and the game ends. That's failing. That negative association of failure permeates our culture. This does not encourage a growth mindset. Let's think about failing in a different way. By changing our mindsets to a growth mindset. This is a little something for you to think about, using FAIL as an acronym. F for first, A for attempt, I for in, and L for learning. How can we change the learning process to see failing, especially the first time, as something to celebrate? It's a good thing. The growth mindset and inclusive education go together. It's an important framework to apply to your classroom teaching. So let's do a little activity looking at phrases to identify fixed. versus growth mindsets. After taking some time to observe the student, the teacher concludes, he is not ready for school. Is that fixed or a growth mindset? A growth mindset would frame it as, how can we get school ready for this child? The fixed mindset thinks, we don't have enough resources for this child. The growth mindset thinks, what can I do with the resources I have? Now I want to take a bit of a sidebar here and explain how this phrase can lead the inclusive education follower down the rabbit hole of religious fervor. I'll start with another example from my personal experience. I used to work in a program with deaf and hard of hearing students. The problem was that most of the teachers at the school could not use or understand sign language. As a result, students' language acquisition was totally disrupted. The vast majority of the interpreters working in the system were not trained and were not qualified. So again, the students' language acquisition was totally disrupted. My point is, those teachers and those interpreters were not educational resources. The interpreters flapped their hands around and seemed adequately qualified to those who hired them, but they were utterly unable to meet the students' educational needs. The students were not learning through this inferior resource. I had no confidence in the interpreter's ability to interpret for mainstreamed core classes like chemistry or language arts. Their interpretation would be unintelligible. So during my time with the students, I would teach chemistry and language arts and other courses. And I would invite deaf adults from the community to come into the classroom to assist with the teaching and the tutoring. Due to this experience, some of those adults later ended up being hired by the board. For the interpreters, I had no use for their skills as interpreters. So I assigned them other tasks, such as tutoring some of the hard of hearing students who had more hearing and speech, a student for whom they couldn't cause as much damage. So I redesigned the whole program because we lacked the resources of adequately trained and skilled interpreters. That was my growth mindset, how to solve that problem of inadequate resources. The fixed mindset sees the student as not functioning in the classroom and therefore needs to be pulled out to a separate setting. To be honest with you, that's exactly what I did. I saw one student completely glazed over in the classroom, wasting time sitting there with an incompetent interpreter spitting out incoherent sign salad. The student couldn't function because the interpreter was dysfunctional, so I removed the student from that setting. In another example, one of my students was attending English class with a regular instructor and an interpreter. The student had failed English for 3 years, so he just decided to skip class. The instructor bribed the student by saying if he attended the last 5 days, that he would pass him. The student's response to this bribe? He didn't even show up to school for those last 5 days. I looked at the whole situation. I knew the interpreter was pushy and her interpreting skills were not great, not adequate to the task. So I talked to the student about it and asked him to join my class, and I would teach him English through ASL. He understood ASL, but he couldn't understand the interpreter. He passed all 3 years because he could understand the ASL instruction. The interpreter was disfluent, so he couldn't understand his hearing teachers, not to mention the interpreter's attitude and behavior. He was not comfortable with her. She embraced the deficit model framework, felt the students were inferior. She would even speak negatively about him to me. That was the point when I decided to take action. So the inclusive education religion doesn't think we should pull students out of the mainstream setting. I broke that rule. The dogma of inclusion practices is not always right. Sometimes the pursuit of inclusion has detrimental effects on students, especially regarding language development. Please think about that. But we can still apply a growth mindset toward keeping students in the classroom by asking, what can the child do independently? It may be different activities compared to classmates, but the growth mindset will want to support and nurture the child's growth in this way. A fixed mindset could be thinking, I need more assistant time so they can work one-to-one with the student while I concentrate on the rest of the class. Whereas a growth mindset would explore, how can I make sure every child has a sense of belonging? If the student is handed off to the EA, does that encourage a sense of belonging? Often it has the opposite effect. The EA can be a useful resource, but consider how a sense of belonging can be achieved among the students. Another example of a fixed mindset. We've tried those strategies before. None of them work. A growth mindset would reflect on whether any parts of the strategies did support progress. A fixed mindset would be full of self-doubt and worry about lack of experience and training. After all, my BEd did not teach me how to do that job. Which is true. Very true. Clearly, the growth mindset would be excited to learn more about it. While your BEd didn't teach you everything you need to know and practice in the classroom, you do know how to go about finding information and the networks you need to do your job through research and other resources. All teachers, especially first-year teachers, feel they don't have the proper training for their teaching assignments. Consider that normal. Your journey towards a growth mindset starts by getting rid of old tropes and bad thought habits. Instead of giving up, ask questions. What about? How about? And so on. Instead of thinking, wow, I really messed that up, and being critical of yourself, try thinking, okay, that's a lesson learned. Now, where do we go from here? Instead of thinking, this is impossible, consider, what's the next baby step? Instead of getting overwhelmed, thinking, I will never get this done. Take a moment to set priorities and concentrate on one thing at a time. If you are tempted to say, I can't, have the courage to add yet. I can't yet. Remember, everyone's growth looks different, whether it's you or your students. Don't compare yourself to other teachers. You'll make yourself crazy. Don't go there. Thanks for attending my lecture.